Hello Year 10, it's Mr. Lloyd here. I want to start this video just by saying I hope you and your families are all safe and well, and I also want to say first of all a big well done for how well you've been doing in the quality of your annotations as a year group, and the quality of work we're seeing back from you every week. You know, these are really challenging times and we've been so impressed as a department with how well you've been working. Now I put this video together because this is the last week we're going to spend on poetry, and we've got a bit of a different task to do this week, and I just want to talk you through a few things kind of going forward as well. So obviously you've been kind of annotating your poems. I know a lot of you have got this booklet, the CGP Power and Conflict Revision Guide. They're fantastic. I use these in my own GCSEs. They've got lots and lots of detail kind of notes on all the poems there. They've got lots of points of context, comparison, other things as well. So I know some of you have been using these. Some of you have been using the Mr. Bruff videos as well that we've been sharing around. If you haven't got round to annotating all your poems, please be working away on that as well, because what we've got to kind of get through is quite a lot of things. If you remember, you do 2 exam papers in English literature, you do 2 language papers, 2 literature papers, and in English language, obviously we do paper 1, paper 2, you've got the reading tasks, the writing tasks. In literature it's a bit different. For paper 1 we do Shakespeare, so we do Macbeth, which we're going to do at the start of year 11. We do Frankenstein, which we've done, and we're going to kind of spend the next couple of weeks after poetry going over Frankenstein in a bit more detail. And then for paper 2, which is the paper we've got in front of us, you do modern text and poetry. So we do Inspector Calls, which we will go back over in year 11 in a bit more detail. We will do Power and Conflict Poetry, which is what we've been doing for the past couple of months. And we do Unseen Poetry as well, which we are going to go over in year 11 in more detail. Just to show you what the kind of question will look like in your exam for Power and Conflict Poetry, so I'll go to the section. You'll always get a list of all the poems. You will always get a question that looks something like this, and you will always get a copy of the poem that they named in the question. So the question here says, compare how poets present the ways that people are affected by war in War Photographer and in one other poem from Power and Conflict. You get 30 marks for that. So we've got an effect of war question. It might be nature, it might be the power of man. This one's war and it's War Photographer. And what I've done really for this bit of work we're going to do this week is I've kind of used that question. The question stem will always stay the same, but our question is going to be about poppies and the effects of war. And I'm just moving this down a little bit. What we want you to do is we want you to have a go at writing a response to this poppies question, and we are going to mark it out of 30 using the GCSE mark scheme here, because it's the last time we will get to do this until trial exams in year 11. We want to have something from you that's got a mark there. We understand as a department that it might not be the kind of the best piece of work you do, but we're going to mark it and see how you get on, and obviously we're going to use these mark sheets to give you feedback as well. Now the question here I've highlighted, this is kind of in Blue Peter style, one I've prepared before. Question we've got is compare the ways poets present the effects of war in poppies and in one other poem from Power and Conflict. 30 marks. Very similar to the one you've just seen on the exam paper. Now to help you with this, there are loads and loads of things that we've attached. We have attached to this piece of work, and it's on our Department Frog site for this week, we've given you some sentence starters, we've given you some example essays of kind of grade 7 to 9 and grade 4 to 5, and I put this video together just to talk you through the process as well, because it's a bit of a jump to go from this as a question to, if you like, a detailed essay plan. What we want all of you to do is to write at least one detailed comparison paragraph where you analyse both poems, and that should take you about 3/4 to one side of A4. So if you like, this is my piece of A4, we'd expect you to at least kind of fill that really. That's the minimum. If you want to write more, obviously you can do. If you want to write more than one detailed comparison paragraph, that's absolutely fine. If you want to spend a full do the full essay, that's more than fine as well, but we are just saying have a go, and that's the minimum we expect. One detailed comparison paragraph, which should take about 3/4 to a side of A4, depends on things like handwriting as well, and obviously if you're typing it. In the exam you would have 45 minutes to do that. We're saying, obviously, you're not there yet, really. You've got another year to go, maybe about an hour to an hour and a half on this. But I'm going to go through some of the bits with you. So if you have a look on the PowerPoint for this week, it goes through it step by step. So slide 1, what if you had to compare Poppies with another poem, what would it be and why? Choose a second poem. I've chosen War Photographer, but it doesn't matter if you haven't chosen that one if you want to do a different one. And then on slide 6 of the PowerPoint, I put together a step-by-step guide of how to do this. So the first thing is read the question carefully. What is it asking you to compare? Well, you're being asked to compare the effects of war. How does war make people feel? Number 2, think of a second poem which contains the effects of war and would compare well with Poppies. I've gone for War Photographer. And then 3 and 4, find 2 to 3 quotations from your poem. So what we're really doing is we're taking all those detailed notes that we've seen you do in your anthologies and just boiling it down to 2 or 3 quotations, because that's all you'll have time to talk about. You know, you've got 45 minutes to do this in your GCSE. And if you look at the CGP revision guide, where there are loads and loads and loads of notes, you know, if I kind of find the Poppies version there, so if you've kind of used these, you've got too much really there to talk about. So what you do is you pick out 2 or 3 things from there. And I would always get you to focus perhaps on the beginning, middle and end, a strong quotation from those things. So you can talk about structure, why they're at the beginning, why they're at the middle, why they're at the end. And then what I've done on slide 7 of the PowerPoint is giving you some sentence starters for comparison. So you can copy those sentence starters, you can use them if you want. I've used them in my sample answers as well, so you've got them there, so you don't need to worry about kind of writing that. So what I'm going to do is just talk you through how I get from that question to, if you like, the example answers. Well, first thing, the effects of war in Poppies. If you think about some of the poems we've read, the effects of war are very, very obvious. You know, you've got Charge of the Light Brigade, you've got the kind of the death there, you've got vivid depictions of kind of combat in some of the other poems, but in Poppies it's about a mum and she loses her son because he grows up and goes off to fight. But you know, whether he dies or not, it doesn't really get mentioned there. But this idea, the effect of war is a mum loses her son. And in War Photographer, it's about a photographer who takes photos and they are of war, and it has an effect on him but not on the people he's trying to reach, not his audience, you know, in the kind of in newspapers and in films. So I'm going to talk about painful memories. They're both about painful memories. That's my comparison sentence to start. In Poppies, the quotation I've gone for is all my words flattened, rolled and were slowly melting. And the reason I picked this quotation out is because it shows the psychological trauma, the damage that is being done psychologically in the mind of the mum is so bad that she can't even speak in this quotation. In the same way that if we get a piece of bad news, if something bad happens, that often, you know, we I feel like shocked into silence here, and all the words are being flattened, rolled, slowly melting. So Jane Weir says that, you know, she uses these verbs to show that the mother's words are leaving, but actually these are all kind of happening to the mum as well. You know, she has almost been like physically flattened by the shock of her son going. She's slowly melting, you know, because, or maybe the vision of her son is slowly melting. This way you can get all those different interpretations in your analysis. And then, because it's not exactly the same, but it's similar, in War Photographer, spools of suffering set out in ordered rows. Now I'm going to look at the kind of the sibilants here, the spools of suffering. He's looking back on his pictures. Spool is like a roll of camera. He's looking back at these pictures in his darkroom alone, and he's looking at picture after picture after picture of people dying and suffering, and, you know, real kind of, if you like, difficult times they're facing. But also, as he's doing this, he is suffering. You know, I don't know how you could do that as a job. Look at suffering all the time and not suffer psychologically yourself, as the mum has done in Poppies. And you've got things like set out in ordered rows. Yeah, the photos, the spools are set out in ordered rows, but that could also be a metaphor for the graves. If you visit World War I, World War II grave sites, I mean, I've got some relatives buried in northern France. There's often row after row after row after row of graves there. And so this could be a metaphor here for that. So what I would do is I'd analyse these words in Poppies in detail, using a pedal paragraph. then I'd use my connective similarly, then analyse war photographer in detail, again using the pedal structure, and then I need to compare them at the end. You can't just stop with that, you need to say what's the same or different about them. So what's the same is they're both about psychological impact. That psychological impact isn't exactly the same, and that's fine. In Poppies, it's about a mum who suffers the psychological trauma of losing her son, and it's, if you like, in this quotation, it's so bad for her that she can't even speak. Whereas in War Photographer, it's about a photographer who's suffering the psychological trauma, like the mum, of looking back over the horrific pictures of war that he's taken. And we don't see quite what happens to him in the same way we do with the mum. You know, we see that she can't even physically speak here. And it could well be that the photographer, maybe, has just become so used to it. And if you think about what happens later on in the poem, you know, this idea that people just have a quick look at it on the news between the bath and pre-lunch beers, this idea that have we become so used to suffering as well that we actually kind of just don't pay any attention, which is different to Poppies, but it's kind of following the same lines there. So that is one detailed comparison paragraph. If I write that up, that's probably going to take me about a side at least of A4, and that's what we're after there. You can use the notes that I've done in this video. You can use the sentence starters, please do. You can use the the sample answers that I put together. I've got a level 4 and 5, a level 7 to 9 one. You can also use things like your revision guides. If you're struggling, you can use the Mr. Brough videos. I know he's done some really good ones on comparison as well there. And we want that. If you want to go on and write a little bit more, then you could talk about beginning, middle and end. The second paragraph might be the ending. Why are the endings of the poems similar or different? What happens in the ending? Do your analysis you've done here, and then why are they similar or different in the end? You know, what are both poets trying to say there? So that's what we'd like you to do. If you're struggling at any point, use the material we've got to support you, but also email us. You can email me, you can email your English teacher, and we'll help you through there as well. If you want to write first and then email us a copy so we can have a look at it, that's absolutely fine. So best of luck, and I look forward to seeing your brilliant poetry responses.